Hello, everyone. Welcome to another series of Hope Live. I'm Adriana Malazzi, community advocate at House of Possibilities. I facilitate Hope's self-advocacy group, whose goal is to provide a well-rounded knowledge of advocacy through a variety of activities and guest speakers. Today's guest is an advocate, an educator, a writer, and entrepreneur. She's the founder of Give Beauty Wings, a program that specifically addresses self-esteem and body image for people with disabilities. Please welcome Xian Horn. Hi, Xian.
Hello.
How are you?
Great. How are you? Long time no see.
Yeah, I know. It's been February.
South by Southwest.
Yes. So it's
so
funny.
So great to see you up there and shining.
Thank you. It's funny because we don't live far. Boston and New York are not that far from each other. Mm-hmm. But we finally met in person in Austin, Texas, which I think is really funny. So thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would love for you to just give us a little bit of a background about yourself.
Oh, okay, sure. Well, so I was not planning to be an advocate. I was an only child and grew up in a kind of bubble where I thought, my disability is the blessing of my life. That's the easy part. And this whole thing that people with disabilities struggle is it's a stereotype that anyway. So it wasn't until my second job ever, where I was a grant writer for a theater in New York called Visible Theater. And there were 15 members with disabilities and 45 members total. And it was so diverse. And I was never really comfortable before with disability only groups because I felt like that didn't reflect the real world. But this group, they were so broken, open, honest, and so charming, so funny, like Actors Studio actors, Kennedy Center award-winning playwrights. And then I would sit in as a grant writer on all these sessions where people were sharing what they were thinking and feeling, and I couldn't believe these were my role models, and so many of them were struggling. And so I knew I wanted to have positive dialogue around how I saw them, but it also made me think, especially around disability, because some were struggling with disability identity, like, how come it is that I never had these feelings around my disability? And I realized that my parents created a bubble around me, and I had the right schools and the right support systems. And so I really wanted to be the love and support that others may not have had. So the clip that you were going to show was actually when I pitched the Dove campaign, asking them to include people with disabilities in their advertising.
Yeah.
Just because I asked myself, okay, if I can't get in touch with kids and parents, where else do we get our sense of self-esteem? And for good or bad, at least it used to be the beauty industry. I think it's changing now with the internet and, Instagram and stuff like that. But beauty standards are always something that, in my course, I really encourage people to kind of throw out what culture is telling you to be, so that you can embrace who you really are and do things at your own pace. I don't think everybody needs to do college. I don't think everybody can do it in 4 years, and that's fine. And I think there's some ideas that everybody has, I need to be married by 30 or whatever it is. They make up stuff. Or at least maybe culture sort of pushing us in that direction. So a lot of what I do is we first address, the things that have hurt us, and go from there. How do we reframe it? How do we look at it again in a different way? So, and I was perfectly content just doing those classes. And then I was asked to speak with my friend Rick Gudotti from Positive Exposure. And there was about 50 people in the room, but some of them were some of the top advocates in New York City. So it connected me with the mayor's office for people with disabilities, with Anita Altman from the UJA Federation. She's retired now, but she created the first HIV/AIDS program for specifically geared towards the Jewish population. I'm half Jewish, and I'm Chinese, by the way, so I'm Jewish. I like to
I
say.
love, I love when you say that. When you introduce yourself, I was hoping you would say it. I love when you say that.
Oh, okay. So somebody's been. Thank you for. I didn't know that. I guess you've been doing your research.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah. So anyway. So after I started speaking, then I was invited to judge an assistive technology competition through AT&T. I've done a lot around adaptive fashion, specifically working with Parsons and the CP Foundation on their Design for Disability program. I just most recently walked the Zappos show, well, I should say Runway of Dreams under Zappos, and no, and it's taken on so many different lives as we talked about yesterday. I'm really passionate about transportation, employment. I'm really passionate about again fashion because I think actually what we wear is incredibly political when it comes to our bodies. If we don't have access, if we don't have the right materials, then it becomes a much bigger issue than I think most people take fashion for granted. And obviously right now when a lot of us are still quarantining, maybe fashion takes a back seat at the moment. Um, but I still think it's very important. And anyway, so there's a lot more we can talk about, and I'm sure we'll get to it.
Yeah.
Um,
So I mean, I just wanted to know how you came up with the name "Give Beauty Wings," and just tell us a little more about that. And I know you do that program um in multiple sites, right? You do it at NYU.
mhm.
You do it at your local Jewish community center,
Yeah,
correct?
obviously I'm not going there at the moment.
Right.
But yeah, they've been very kind. They give me free space when I need it. And it's a wonderful venue. It really is. Yeah, so basically, Give Beauty Wings, the name came to me basically in my sleep. I was, like lying in bed, and I was like, "Bing!" But what really the inspiration behind it is that, this is really about putting our beauty to action. Because that's when I realized when I was doing this work that it was truly about purpose. Like because I think we maybe not this group, but a lot of people put excuses in the way from the things they want to do and they're dreaming about. I know I was doing that. I wanted to be a writer, and I was a writer who never wrote. And as someone who actually wrote two pieces in the last week, I'm like super proud of like that progress because I would overthink everything because I love it so much. And but it's really my job to help people get as many clouds out of the way so you can shine as brightly as possible. That's it. But really, Give Beauty Wings is about putting beauty to action. That's why I wanted to evoke that idea that we can be empowered if we use our beauty. We get everyone's given gifts. I absolutely believe that we have God given gifts that if we don't use them, the world misses out.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's really the impetus behind Give Beauty Wings.
Nice.
Um, the program when it first started was not called that, but it evolved into that, which was kind of fun. And now I have a nonprofit in that name where I hope to foster more leadership and to also I want it to be vocationally focused and really just supporting people in the things they want to do. I know a lot of my students are reaching out to me right now saying they're bored at home. They don't
Yeah.
feel that sense of purpose that we all want to feel. We all want to know that we're loved. We all want to know that we have a voice and a purpose. And so actually I'm doing a workshop if anyone wants to join in November. I'll be doing kind of managing your expectations in the time of COVID or 2020 when a lot of things that we didn't expect, we were hit with this year. And how do we manage the disappointment, right? How do we manage when we had all these plans that got pushed aside?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so that will be some point early November. I'll send the date to you when we have it. Okay, if you
Great.
want
Yeah.
to share it
And
with
we
the
can
group.
pop the link into the comment section when you give us that information. That would be great.
Yeah,
Um,
and I'm so excited to talk to the group here. I
yeah.
really can't wait.
So we had this clip ready that Sean you mentioned, and that was from 2011, right? That you submitted that clip, or is it
Well,
sooner than
actually, it depends on which clip you're talking about because
the
in
Dove,
2010,
the Dove campaign clip?
yeah, that was August of 2010.
10. Okay, okay,
Yeah,
and
but I think what you might be looking at is that when Dove didn't take me up on it, I recycled that clip and tried to make it more universal to apply
oh,
to
I
other
see.
beauty companies.
Yeah.
And then later in 2011, Amy Purdy was part of the L'Oreal campaign,
Mhm.
and so I really didn't. It didn't have to be me. I just wanted to see that representation. So, but I can tell you that in the last 10 years, so much has changed, and it's so wonderful to see. And I think a
Mhm.
lot of that has to do with Twitter and Instagram because one tweet can undo a company, and so if they're not listening, companies will get left behind, and so that's people got the memo,
Yeah.
and so it seems like it's happening more and more and more.
Yeah. So I bring up that clip because in that clip you say I'm a role model, and you are a role model to so many.
Well,
And
actually, what I said is I thought that to be a role model, you had to be perfect or always doing
right.
great things. But I realized maybe it's enough to just be honest.
Mhm.
I think everyone's a role model. Everyone on this call, on this broadcast, and in the Google group is a role model. And I think especially when you have a visible disability, as we do, Adriana. Like I
Yeah.
think we're role models whether we want to be or not.
Right. Exactly.
And so when that happens, I think it's very important to be conscious of what we put out into the world, and that's part of why I'm, try to put out as much love as I can because I realize, yeah, walking around with two ski poles, you know, you don't really have a choice, so you might as well roll with it.
Yeah. Yeah. So
But
the
I love
reason
it. I
why,
enjoy it. I embrace it.
right? The reason why I brought that up is because I want to know who are your role models, or if you have more than one role model, who are those role models?
Oh my gosh, so many. In fact, I just wrote a piece about my godmother. In Brooklyn, there's a place called Jane's Carousel. Well, she is my mom's best friend, and she spent 27 years refurbishing this carousel from I think Idora Park is what it's called. Yeah, but anyway, so it's in Ohio. And anyway, she spent 27 years with an X-Acto knife, like scraping the paint and renewing this entire thing. And now it belongs to Brooklyn and to the city. Um, and I mean, the thing that I was so impressed with her was, she's a billionaire. She could have just like, stayed at home spending money or doing something else, but no, she really is an artist, and she passed away in July.
Oh,
Um,
I'm sorry.
and yeah, and so I actually wrote about the things that I learned from her. My mother is a huge role model. Without well, she does give a lot of advice, and a lot of it feels at the time like, Mom, I really don't need to hear this. But the truth is like my mom was an Asian woman running her own department at Avon as an art director. I remember running into a coworker of hers, and he said, "Your mom owned Avon," and I thought like that like I didn't realize that was revolutionary in any way. Like I
Mhm.
just went to set and it was a fun day with mom. But I realized like it is not necessary. We don't always have great examples of leadership. But I think she is definitely one. My dad, talking about leadership, he once said something so powerful to me. He said, because he runs his own law firm. He's the only lawyer in his law firm, and he said, Sean, I always assume if something goes wrong in his business, it's because I didn't delegate properly. And I thought, like, how amazing is that you're willing to, you know what I mean? I'm sure there are things
Mm-hmm.
that happen that maybe on the surface are not his fault at all, but he's
Mm-hmm.
willing to take that responsibility. And so I've had a lot of role models, and I can't even, I mean, I could do a whole hour just on the role models. Judy Heumann is a huge role model, and what I love about her is she's more interested in your work than everything she's done, which is
Yeah.
incredible.
Yes.
Um, so I'm sure when she talks to you guys, she was more interested in finding out what you're interested in.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a great conversation when we had Judy. It was so much fun.
Yeah, so there's many different, and Marley Matlin is a friend of mine.
Yeah.
I think
I
she
love
handled
her.
herself with tremendous poise and grace,
Yes.
and really was a trailblazer. And for a long time, I think she was the only one really. Her and Jerry Jewell were the only ones in the '80s that were, representing disability
Yeah.
really. So so anyway, there's a lot, and we could do a whole hour just on that question.
Yeah.
So
So yeah, we're gonna give some of our members an opportunity to ask you a few questions.
great, bring it on.
So here
I'm
we go.
ready.
Yep.
Can't
Are you
wait.
ready for these hard hitting questions? All right. Here we go.
Woohoo!
So,
Hello.
uh, hello, my name is Kayvon. Um,
Hello,
today,
Kayvon.
today I'm gonna talk about
Wait, ask the question right here.
how
did
did you
figure
figure out the skill skiing poles are the best tools all for you to walk with?
Great question. Again, my dad being awesome, and my dad is an athlete, and so he had me in the pool and doing all kinds of things with him. He loves solo sports like skiing, like boxing. So he was always very active, and he has these sports magazines, and he was flipping through a sports magazine, and they had these adapted ski poles that were kind of Nordic poles. I should say that when I was a kid, I never liked I always disliked the regular ones that, like the crutches that hold on to your elbows. Like, I didn't like having things attached to my arms. Like, I wanted my arms to be free. You know what I mean? So and also at that time the technology, it was not there, so they were pretty heavy as well. So
Yes.
what I like about ski poles is that they're light. They're also kind of indestructible. I mean, I can throw them around. They don't, they won't get warped. Yeah, so I actually started with wooden poles though. I don't know how many people know that because I don't really talk about it. And back in those days, then my friends would, decorate it with paint and stickers and make it fun, but they were kind of light. And I think as I got older, obviously you want to be able to lean on something and not have it break because you can break wood pretty easily. So when my dad saw these Nordic poles and they came with the rubber ends, it was a no-brainer, really. I mean, we chopped them down because they were adult size, and I was 10, I think, when I switched to actual ski pole. And then at a certain point, one of my Nordic pole, like the rubbers on it, like rolled off at a rest stop in Pennsylvania. And so I ended up having to get a whole new set of poles. But they were real ski poles that I would chop down at the end, that pointy part at the end, we'd chop down and we'd add rubber, ends to them. And so they've been adaptive for a while. And yeah, so I mean, but I highly recommend it for anyone that can do it. Obviously, it's not for everybody, but I really enjoy it. It also starts a lot of conversations. I get a lot of going skiing, and I embrace it because it's a conversation starter. And I people do look and they want to have questions, and I think I've made a lot of friends because of them. That and my funny name.
That's nice, Michelle. Thank you, Michelle.
Th- Thank you for the question.
Thank you, Kayvon. All right, here's our next question.
Hi, my name is Ben.
Hi, Ben.
My question is, have you ever skied before? If so, do you use the same poles for skiing as you do for walking?
Yeah, well, I think the last part of my answer kind of answered that in the sense that the ones I use are adapted, and often chopped to a different size or customized to my height. So no, I don't use the same poles but I have done adaptive skiing, especially in high school. See, my Jewish grandmother had a house up in Hunter, and she still does, but she's no longer with us. We have it now. And when I went up there, a couple of times I did adaptive skiing for sure, and it was so fun. I remember it being so fun. But definitely do not use the same poles. I think, yeah, these are street poles that I've got. They're New York City ready poles that I have. But yeah, I definitely highly recommend adaptive skiing for anyone who wants to try it. It was really fun. Yeah, so I did that about 2 or 3 times, and I'm not sure that they still have it up in Hunter. Otherwise, I'd love to. You know what else I've done, which I really like, is snow tubing.
Ooh,
Where you're in that donut and they push you.
that was fun. I did that before.
I
It's
love
so
snow
fun.
tubing. I could snow tube all day, and I do when I go. You can't get me off that hill. The mountain. Sorry, the mountain. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, I hope that answers your question. Thank you for the question.
Yakum.
Alrighty.
Attend. And what classes did you take?
Oh, okay, great question. I went to in Middletown, Connecticut. There is a school called Wesleyan, and it was my first choice school, and it was kind of a reach school. Luckily, they really like my. I will tell you very honestly, my SAT scores were not great, um,
That's
and my
okay.
grades weren't. I mean, they were fine, but they weren't, top notch. I definitely was. I struggled in science and math. So it was a real reach for me to get into Wesleyan, but luckily they really prioritized the essay, which as a writer, I was more comfortable with the essay, and also the interview. So I actually went in for a 45-minute interview, and it turned out the woman who interviewed me knew the one person I knew at Wesleyan, and she had a huge crush on him. So we talked for an hour.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and then when I got there, I took a lot of really interesting classes. I took Japanese history, Chinese history. I took one of my favorite classes was actually on the topic of truth. Like,
What's
what is
that?
truth? It was like a philosophical class. It was cool. I took a really great poetry class where we got to actually meet the poets that we were reading. And some of them were
Oh,
incredibly
that's
famous.
cool.
Yeah, yeah. And I got to meet my favorite poet of all time. His name was Robert Creeley. I got his email address. And I got to tell you guys this story because I hope it never happens to you. I got up all my courage to get his email address to stay in touch with him. And he said I could send him my poetry. And then I just totally chickened out. I was like, how could my favorite poet of all
Oh,
time, the best poet that I could possibly know, like, what would they think of my poetry? And so I
why did you
finally
chicken
was like,
out?
yeah, so like 2 years later, I was ready to email him, and guess what? He died
You
2 months
chickened away.
earlier. Yeah, so don't wait, guys. Don't wait. That's my lesson for that. But I
Thank you.
loved Wesleyan. I thought the professors and everyone there wanted to change the world. So that was
One
the
of
coolest part. Yeah, but it was also really intimidating because a lot of kids were 18 with 2 nonprofits, and I thought, well, I guess I'll just sit here because you're doing amazing things, and that's part of why it was really important for me to do this self-esteem work. Is that I don't want that to happen to anyone else. I think it's really important to know what people are doing and let it motivate you. But I know for myself when I was younger that I would kind of like put myself down as a result. It's like, oh, okay, well, Adriana can be awesome or Shannon can be great, but that's not for me. Now I realize everybody
You
has
are
their part to
great.
play. You know
You
what I
are
mean,
great.
Shannon?
Yes.
You have your voice, you have your contributions to make, and they're separate
Yeah.
from mine, but we can celebrate each other's, you know?
Yes, we can.
And so now when I see people doing great things, it motivates me to keep going and to celebrate them too, you know? But I think, yeah, so you
I
need
keep
adequate
moving.
self-esteem to do that, you know? And I think that's why there's a lot of bullying is that, you know, sometimes we feel threatened by other people's greatness, but we should actually be inspired by their greatness instead, you know?
Because you get bullied. If someone bullies you, you just gotta ignore them, or you just gotta tell them, "Do not do that."
Yeah, focus on you. You know,
Yeah,
it is your life. You are the star of your life.
that's right.
So
Don't let
I
anybody
agree with
take
that
that shine away.
completely.
And thank you so
All
much.
Thank
right.
you, Shannon. That's a great question.
Thank
It brought me
you.
back to school.
Thanks.
Thank
All right,
you.
we're moving on to our next question.
Hello,
Hi, my name's
Kevin.
Kevin. My question
Hi.
is it hard for you to New York City?
You know, it's interesting because obviously, so I don't know if Adriana shared this with you guys, but I just wrote an article trying to save a program that made it very much easier for me to get around. You know, it's always been the case since I was little that going by cab was the easiest way, but it's also the most expensive. And so the MTA, I don't know what paratransit is like in Boston for you guys. I'd love to hear about that from some of you. Maybe we can talk about it later. But the regular paratransit here in New York, you have to book 1 to 2 days in advance, and you could be waiting hours for a van, or and you don't know if it's a shared ride, if you've got to go to Brooklyn first, if you've got, you know what I mean. So sometimes even once you get on, it could take 2, 3, 4 hours. And so I think that's a huge problem for employment for most of us, you know, with disabilities, because we can't guarantee to a boss that we'll be on time. So finally, they created a program, which is a same day travel program where I can book with an app in 5 minutes a car. And so that's been hugely helpful. And the regular vans that, you know, take forever are $87 per person per ride for the MTA to pay for. And this cab program is on average $37 per person per ride, and that includes interborough travel. So to me, it's a no-brainer that they should be investing in these programs. But they're actually, right before COVID hit, they were trying to cut it. So I wrote a piece comparing, actually, I think it was Boston, DC. You know, they were trying to say that they were on par, cutting us down to 8 round trips per month was on par with Boston. We were, it was, we were able to refute that really easily because it wasn't true. So yes, I mean, so yes, theoretically, like I can't use the subway. I don't, even with elevators, I wouldn't be able to use it because getting on and off the train itself, I feel like I'm risking my life. So very early on, I realized subway wasn't going to work for me. You know what I mean? So I'm thankful for this program, and I'm really trying to save it. So actually, thank you for asking the question because then I can also I gave Adriana this petition that I started to try to save the program, and it gives you a lot of details. Okay, there you go. Thanks for the link, girl. But yeah, it gives you a lot of details on what's going on, and if you guys sign it, you're helping to just, you know, lend more support, and hopefully we can keep the program. But right now in COVID, they haven't cut it because I just think that they're reeling and dealing with other things. But I'm still on it because I know once this is, you know, once we get through this phase, we're gonna have to talk about this, and I'm not gonna see it go because one thing that Crip Camp and Judy taught me, Kevin, is that it being too expensive is not a good enough reason. You know, if you have seen Crip Camp, you'll realize that the reason that they didn't want to sign this 504 was because they said, oh, it's going to cost too much money. But as we know, now that we live in a much more accessible world, we know that it's created so many opportunities, not just for people with disabilities, but moms and anyone with packages in their hands. And you know what I mean? That I'm anyway, so not having enough money is not a good excuse. It's a civil rights issue as far as I'm concerned. So thank you for that great question.
Thank you. And yes, regarding transportation, we have a similar paratransit called the Ride here, and you have to book it days in advance as well and waste hours of your life.
Yes. And especially think if you have cancer and you don't have much time left, but you also don't have money to just, spend on. Yeah. So anyway, I don't mean to interrupt, but it really bothers me that this is, basically you're saying that everybody else has the right to travel same day except if you have a disability, and that's not okay with me.
We're extremely lucky in the Boston area. So the MBTA partnered with Lyft and Uber. And so pre-COVID, I was really fortunate and I took advantage of it a lot to use Uber and Lyft, accessible Uber and Lyft, to get wherever I needed to go. And it has really allowed me to be more spontaneous and, to be able to join people at the last minute. I had a friend.
I know that's new for us, isn't it, Adriana?
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, so this is the thing is New York did this program too, and it was life-changing, and for the pilot, it was unlimited. You know what I mean? So you could go anytime, and when your meeting is over, it's over instead of, you missed your pickup time or they show up 2 hours early.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to hear it changed your life, but, I just don't want to see it go away. It should be expanded, not contracted.
Exactly. And it's funny that I didn't know you went to Wesleyan. So a friend of mine went to Wesleyan too, and she was here in town for 24 hours. And because I had access to accessible Uber and Lyft, I was able to meet up with her.
Right, she probably told you last minute.
Yeah. She's like, I'm here. Can you meet me? And I'm like, oh, okay.
Yes. I was invited to Runway of Dreams last year that way, and because of that invitation, I also got invited to the CP Foundation's housing project, which I ended up speaking at the American Institute of Architects, and like what they're doing, especially for freelancers. Like, this is hugely important. And if you have a job interview and they call you in and they say, can you come in at 3:00? If you have a traditional accessorite or paratransit van, you're going to have to say no.
Right, exactly.
So I think we really need to examine the ways in which transportation affects employment, fashion affects employment. There's so many elements,
Yeah. So we're going to move on to,
okay.
We have a bunch of other questions from our members, so I'm sorry.
I'm passionate.
We hijacked it about transportation. So take it away.
Hi, my name's Ellen.
Hi,
Ellen. And which celebrity did you enjoy meeting the most?
You know what? First of all, I'm gonna mention two people. Actually, there's so many. Like I'm already thinking of a third as I said that. So listen. So when I was a kid, I was at an event and I met Jackie Mason. He was a Jewish comedian that was pretty famous in the 70s, 80s, and beyond. And he was in like Caddyshack 2 or 3 or something, and I had just seen it like 2 days earlier. So I saw him and I reenacted the whole movie for him. And this was when I was 9 years old. And he said at the end, he goes, "Hey kid, you want to be my manager?" And I actually met the president that day, but I was more excited about meeting Jackie Mason in that moment because he just made me feel like $1 million. And funny thing is, when I was 21, we actually moved into a building he was living in. And so I was in an elevator with him at 21, and I said, we met, just, the day we met this president. And he goes, which Bush? Because it was the first Bush. So when I said the first Bush, he looked at me like I had three heads because, obviously I was the only 9-year-old in that room at the time. And we've become really friendly. George Takei also lives in that building from Star Trek. And he's such a gentleman. The first time I met him, I was like, okay, be cool, because he was right at the breakfast table next to me, and I was like, he's having breakfast with his husband. I'm not going to bother him. And he actually started talking to me, and it ended up being an hour and a half breakfast, and he did, Julius Caesar for us. But the most recent one, I've got to give some love to a woman that I have even more respect for now that I met her, was last year around this time, actually. It's almost the anniversary of meeting her. I met Emma Thompson. I don't know. She's Nanny McPhee. She's so many things. I've known her from, since Sense and Sensibility and before. I remember loving this movie she was in that nobody really watches called Dead Again, with her ex-husband, Kenneth Branagh. But anyway, when I met her, it was at a premiere where she had written the script, and she had a small part in this movie called Last Christmas with Emilia Clarke and Henry Golding from Crazy Rich Asians. And so she actually stayed in the row to talk to everyone, and I was the last person in line. So I ended up talking to her for about 25 minutes, and also huge fan of this series her husband was in. So I said, oh, I wish your husband were here because I'm a big fan of the Buccaneers. And he was across the room, and she goes, Greg, she's a fan of the Buccaneers. And so it became like, I felt like I left that situation only spending 20 minutes with them, feeling like, oh, Emma Thompson is my friend. But yeah, so I was actually thinking about maybe writing her again, and just kind of, she was so open, she was so sweet, very real. And that's always so nice. And she didn't have to wait in the aisles talking to people. Most of premieres, I don't know if you know this, but they get ushered away into the back and nobody sees them. Maybe they catch a couple of pictures with people. But I thought she was so down to earth, so real, and so willing to be there. So it was fun. Those are my top 3.
Thank
Great.
you.
Thank
Great
you.
It brought back great memories.
Thank you. Yeah, I remember last year when we met at South by Southwest, and we were talking, and I was like, "Oh, do you want to hang out tomorrow?" And you're like, "Oh, I was invited to go to Willie Nelson's house," and I was like, "Oh, okay."
Oh, but guess what? I ended up hanging out with Marlee Matlin instead.
Oh, that's awesome. I love Marlee Matlin.
To ever have was like deciding between Willie Nelson's house or Marlee Matlin dinner, but the dinner was only 8 or 10 people, whereas Willie Nelson's house was going to be 500 to 1,000 people. So I figured, you know what, I'm going to be more missed in this room than that one, and I'm so glad because she's been a great friend to me also, Marlee.
Awesome.
So yay, it all worked out. I forgot about that. Oh my god.
All right, here's another question for you.
Hello, my name is Justin. You kind of answered my question earlier. So, are you athletic at all in your active lifestyle?
Well, I've got to say, this is going to be the quickest answer because I will tell you, I'm more of a couch potato than anything else. My dad is super active, so when he's around, he makes me more active. But definitely, I will say that I love just being in my room, not doing much. So no, I'm not very active. I should be more. Definitely not. I'm not swimming right now. I'm not doing a lot of things I should be doing. So mostly couch surfing is what I do. Except couch surfing in my own house. Yeah, so that's definitely the quickest answer of all because I'm going to be really real with you guys. I wish I were more active. I'm doing a lot of dance parties though at home. That's how I get athletic is at weddings And yeah, back at Wesleyan, I dance up a storm. If the music's good, that's my exercise.
That's athletic.
Wait, what'd you say, dear?
That's athletic enough.
Yeah, I guess that counts, and it's more fun. I don't feel like I'm working.
Yeah.
Personally, yeah. I've done a lot of adaptive sports, though. I do want to give a shout out to Leaps of Faith. They did a adaptive water skiing program. I've done parasailing. I mean, I've done a few things. But yeah, but definitely in my daily life, absolutely not. I wish I could say otherwise, but I'm gonna be honest.
All right. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you for the great question.
All right.
Hello. Whoa.
Uh-oh. Some technical
My face was suddenly huge. Okay.
technical difficulties. Shannon was going to be asking the next question, and I guess she had some connectivity issues.
Oh, okay.
So I will ask on her behalf. And she wanted to know if you can drive independently.
You know, I gotta say that that's actually something that I don't have a desire to do for a couple of reasons. One is that my legs tend to fly up when I find something funny or if I'm really focused. And so if someone makes me laugh while I drive, I'm afraid that like I'll hit somebody. I know that you can get, obviously hand controls. I think, those are very expensive vehicles. So maybe one day I'll do that, but I will tell you that, obviously I want to be careful, and having, 8 or 10,000 pounds of metal is not under my control, is not really something I look forward to personally. But I mean, I love getting in the car, but yes, I can't say that I drive independently, and I'm thinking of humanity when I don't.
Well, plus in New York, most people in New York really don't need a car.
True. It's funny. My friend who was a city kid his whole life moved to LA, and he was like landlocked for the longest time because he never needed a driver's license. He never had one.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I think you're right. City kids, this is a little bit different for us. Obviously, if you're in California, that's almost impossible, right? But yeah. But anyway, there's so much transportation here, and thank God for Accessorite. I want to say, like, as much as I want to see this program, but I wouldn't have any means to go without them or without cabs. And I love my New York City cab drivers. I want to take a moment to just say thank you, because I love talking to them from all over the world, and they're my friends, and they've been very good to me.
Well, we have one final question left for this session. It's from Ben.
Hi, Ben.
My name is Ben again. My question is, do you have any pets?
Oh, this is a heartbreaking question just because I had a dog from age 6 to 22, when I was 6 to 22. And I am an only child, so for me, she was like a little sister. So when she passed away, my mom's heart was broken, my heart was broken, and it happened very quickly. So we were in shock. And we have a building that when we had the dog at first, it was allowed to have dogs. And then they changed the rules at some point, let's say when she was maybe 10 years old. And so when we thought about getting another dog, it would have had to look exactly like our old dog. And my mom said, like, that's kind of like your husband dies and then you marry a guy who looks just like him. We weren't very comfortable with that. But I've got to tell you, I miss having a pet, a dog especially, every day. My parents and I always talk about it, but also I travel a lot more now. Obviously not at this moment in quarantine and COVID, but my mom also travels a lot more too. So we feel like it wouldn't be fair to a pet, you know what I mean? And also, yeah, the rules. I mean, I could probably get a service dog, but to be honest with you, our landlords are not the friendliest, and they want any excuse to kick us out because they made the mistake of telling us we had the best apartment in the building. But as a result, they've wanted us out since the day we got here, which was when I was in the womb. So it's a long time. So the short answer is no, not right now. But I would love to have one. I would love to have multiple.
I'm
And I
sorry, but
always
your
remember
dog.
going to like the the pet stores. You pass the window, and I wanted all the puppies in the window. I thought my mom was so cruel when she would say, "No, you can't have it." I was like, "Okay, when I grow up, I'm gonna have all the puppies. I'm gonna take all the puppies from the window." But obviously that hasn't happened yet. So thanks for the great question.
Yeah, I'm sorry, but your dog.
Thank you.
Thank
She's in our
you.
hearts.
And thank you, Sean, for joining us today. I really appreciate it. We all really appreciate it. I will post the link in the description of this video so people can sign the petition to keep accessible, affordable transportation in the city.
Great.
Because it definitely is a must.
Thank
Definitely
you,
a
dear. I appreciate that.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, and we'll see you next time.